You're listening to the text of a letter I wrote to the newspaper Workers' World while I was on death row. The sickening attacks on gay people in cities across the nation recently is a reflection of the sickness that simmers at the core of the American soul. It is here that a truly perverse hatred is bred, and from here that all attacks are launched against all who are seen as other. This violence, which seems psychosexual in nature, is an attack on the self that seeks to destroy a part of the self that threatens the self. From Matthew Shepard to Alabama, to that bloody American ground that was once the seat of the American Confederacy, Richmond, violence spawned by the dark pit of hatred and fear is unleashed by men who claim a false and twisted purity. More often than not, those who find themselves attacking gay folks violently are replaying a violence that they grew up with or that they continue to act out of against their family or children. Is it a coincidence that Richmond, the city where a black man was burned to death and decapitated, is followed several months later with the decapitation and torture of a gay man? I think not. This cruel and savage violence must be stopped, but it won't be the cops that stop it, for they are the agents of legalized state violence. The brutality that occurs in their own homes daily. The recent spate of cops who kill their wives and kids more than proves that. The people are the solution. So my thanks to the Rainbow, on the move to freedom. Free the Move 9. This is Mumia Abu Jamal.
If I'm a slave, call me a slave. Don't tell me that I'm a free person and I'm still a slave. Yeah, that really lulls me to sleep. You're not really a slave, you know. You're a co-worker. You know, you're a member of the firm, you know. This is the Bodie plantation, you know. And you are one of our business associates. Now, get that plow moving.
The Henrietta Marie was an English slave ship that sank off the coast of Key West in 1700 after selling 191 enslaved people in Jamaica. Nearly 300 years later, archaeologists surveyed the Henrietta Marie and uncovered what may be the largest collection of artifacts from an early slave trade ship. This rare discovery offers a powerful glimpse into a cruel and pivotal period in history, connecting visitors and residents of the Florida Keys to the past. WLRN's Julia Cooper tells us more about the collection.
Inside the second floor of the Mel Fisher Maritime Museum, a small room covered in bare wood is cast in a dim surface glow. It's a recreation of a below-deck slave hold. On the wall hang several pairs of iron shackles. The sound of planks creaking in sync with ocean waves fills the room. And then we hear the words of an excerpt from the 1789 autobiography of Olaudah Equiano, also known as Gustavus Vasa. He chronicles the harrowing experience of being placed on a slave ship after being stolen from his birthplace in modern-day Nigeria.
These filled me with astonishment, which was soon converted to terror. I looked around the ship and found a multitude of black people of every description chained together.
The shackles and several other items in the exhibit were all recovered from the Henrietta Marie, which sank during the early days of the transatlantic slave trade. Madeline Burnside is the chief curator at the museum. She says the artifacts are believed to be part of the world's largest source of tangible objects from a slaving vessel.
our history as a nation does not begin in 1776. So that was kind of the underlying thing. How are we going to explain this? And we have a lot of artifacts that really speak to that.
The controversial treasure hunter and ship salvager Mel Fisher first discovered the site of the Henrietta Marie by accident. He originally thought it may have been the wreckage of Nuestra Señora de Atocha, a Spanish galleon that was carrying unimaginable wealth in the form of silver, gold, emerald, and pearls from across the Americas. But it wasn't, and it remained unsurveyed until several years later when archaeologists from the Mel Fisher Maritime Heritage Society went back to excavate the site in 1983. Many of those artifacts were compiled into a traveling exhibit in the 1990s. Items recovered from the Henrietta Marie were sent to places like Mobile, Alabama, and the Pompeii Museum of Slavery and Emancipation in the Bahamas until last year.
Part of the reason it was on the road was we had nowhere to put it.
Now, the artifacts have a final resting place at the museum, and some that were too fragile to travel will be on display for the first time ever.
You've got to serve the people who live here. You've got to tell them their story. You'd like it as a story that everyone could be proud of. It isn't always. History's dirty.
The new exhibit allows museum goers to see objects rarely found anywhere in North America.
And there are literally thousands of objects from that ship. I don't know that will ever be equal. Other slave ships have been found, but they're not as comprehensive.
That's Corey Malcolm. He's the lead historian for the Florida Keys History Center. Before that, though, Malcolm served as an archaeologist during the excavation of the Henrietta Marie.
It just brings an undeniable reality to the whole notion that people were forced to sail across the Atlantic Ocean from West Africa to the Americas.
The exhibit covers nearly 245 years of history, starting in Africa. But a portion is dedicated to the way these stories hit home in the Keys.
I think people don't realize that we actually do have an incredibly strong connection.
Burnside says that both slavery and anti-slavery operations have extensive histories in the Keys.
When emancipation was declared formally on January 1st, 1863, a lot of the South didn't hear about it. That's why you have Juneteenth. Key West heard about it on January 18th. That's only 18 days.
It's stories like that, and of the people who were involved and impacted, that Burnside says are important to showcase. The slave trade exhibit is now open at the Mel Fisher Maritime Museum. I'm Julia Cooper in Key West.
And this is WLRN News.
Hitler had the supreme fascist state. And what was he worried about in Europe and in Germany? He was worried about white genetic annihilation. What is everybody in Europe worried about now?
Germany has been Europe's largest and most stable economy for decades, but last week the country reported lower than expected growth to the gross domestic product, and attributed that mainly to shrinking industrial manufacturing and the war in Ukraine. Marcel Fratsche is president of the German Institute for Economic Research, and he joins us from Berlin. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
What happened? I mean, the German economic model was considered the most successful in Europe.
Well, Germany was hit particularly hard by the pandemic and now by the energy shock coming from the Ukraine war. So Germany was very dependent on Russian energy, fossil fuels before the war. That meant energy cost increased a lot. Germany has a very large energy-intensive industry. That's one part of the story. The other part of the story is that after a very successful decade of the 2010s, many German companies didn't manage the transformation towards new technologies.
What do you believe German companies would need to do to make the economy overall more successful?
German companies need to do two things. They need to reshape or rebalance their model of globalization. They are far too dependent on China. So diversify, be less dependent on China and less dependent on the United States. That's another big threat coming from the Trump administration and the trade conflict that in this administration is likely to pick with Germany and with Europe. And second, they need to become more innovative in digital technologies and green technologies, electric cars as an example, where companies have enjoyed the success of the past decade, but to some extent have been a victim of their own success.
What are the political implications? Because, of course, the coalition government collapsed just a few weeks ago.
Well, in an ideal world, the government would step in and have a major fiscal stimulus, maybe to some extent comparable to what the U.S. Economy experienced both under the Trump and under the Biden administrations. Maybe a little bit less strong because that increased government debt tremendously, but the German government has been going the opposite direction. It has a debt brake which basically doesn't allow the government, the federal and the state governments to run deficits. So cutting spending, in particular public investment in times when it's difficult like now, is the worst that a government can do. But for that, the government really need to change course and have a major drive on investment, and including also tax cuts for companies and for citizens.
What political parties are in a position to benefit?
There are completely unrealistic expectations among citizens, what the government, what the state has to deliver. Germany has a very different economic model compared to the U.S., very big social security system. There is this expectation the government has to take care of its citizen, and that's just not realistic in a situation like this, where companies have to do most of the heavy lifting. And so the opposition clearly is benefiting in this campaign for the new government, elections taking place at the end of February next year. But the citizens are going to be disappointed because the new government, no matter what coalition government it will not be able to deliver on those expectations.
And does this promote populism and extremism sometimes?
Well, in Germany, we have an increasing social polarization, inequality and savings, and the people losing from globalization and from technological change are often people with lower income, lower skills. This gives a lot of support to right-wing extremist parties. The anti-democratic AfD, Alternative for Germany, that's the translation of the party, has gained in many recent polls and state elections. So populism is on the rise because populists pretend that they're easy solutions when they're not.
But in your explanation of events, it sounds as if many working-class Germans have a right to be dissatisfied.
If you look at the facts, we have record employment. We have never had more people in jobs as we have today. Wages have been rising, including for low-income workers. The minimum wage has increased substantially by more than 40% since 2015. But the concerns, the worries about the future, those are completely understandable. Germany has an aging society, so social benefits will have to be reduced in order to stay manageable. There will have to be tax increases for some to also finance government spending. There's climate change. There are geopolitical conflicts in Europe with the Ukraine, but it's just outside of the European Union. So my point is, looking at the past 15 years, I think Germany has done really well. The worry is about the next 15 years, and those concerns are fully justified and understandable.
I'm sure I don't have to tell you, Mr. Fratscher, that the rest of the world gets a little more concerned about any rise of right-wing extremism in Germany than in other places. Yes,
Germany has a history with a very, very dark spot in the 1930s and 1940s. German democracy has many checks and balances. German citizens are ultimately pro-European, and I know one has to be careful saying that, but I do believe that German citizens do remember history and have taken the lessons from that. So I'm actually quite confident that German democracy is strong enough to withstand those conflicts that we currently experience.
Marcel Fratscher is president of the German Institute for Economic Research. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Everybody's always in a hurry these days.
If they're not rushing somewhere, they'll be changing something that doesn't need changing.
That's why I'm glad we're standing behind the president.
Sure we are. It just makes good sense. You don't want to change horses in midstream.
Why are they sticking with this age-old horse shit? Why are they sticking with the same old garbage? Who hires these people?
I mean, I feel insulted just having seen it. You know what I mean?
That's offensive.
Bad.
Poorly costumed.
Would you vote for that person based on that commercial?
You know I don't vote.
Why don't you vote?
Last time I voted that one time, Major League Baseball, when they started the fans voting thing, and I voted for Boo Powell for first base. He didn't get in, and it just disappointed me. It stayed with me. It's futile. That was it.
You've never voted for president?
No. Do you vote?
No. I always vote for the Academy Awards, but I never win.
Liz, do you vote? Do you vote?
No, I don't vote, no. I don't like the rooms. Too claustrophobic. I can't vote in small places.
As the electorate keeps getting younger and more diverse, Democrats have talked a lot about demographics being destiny. This year, though, that changing electorate did not swing things their way. A number of key voting blocs that are typically part of the Democratic Party base moved towards President-elect Trump, and he made gains among those already supporting him. Now, this was all especially noticeable in the swing states. NPR's Domenico Montanaro and Elena Moore have been digging into all the exit polls. They heard to break down what happened and why it matters. Hi, you two.
Hey.
Hey, great to be with you.
Domenico, you kick us off. This calls to mind another piece of conventional wisdom, which is that historically in low turnout elections, you expect Republicans to do well. In high turnout elections, the opposite, that Democrats would do well. That did not quite pan out this year. Do we know why?
Well, yeah, and this was a pretty high turnout election. 64% of registered voters cast ballots. That's the third highest in 100 years. But I've been saying this, it became even truer in this election, but we're in the middle of a political realignment. Higher propensity voters, upper class voters are moving toward Democrats. Blue collar white voters have moved heavily toward Republicans, and they turned out in bigger numbers in this election. Trump was also able to add to his coalition, cutting into margins with groups that have traditionally sided with Democrats.
Okay, I want to just go piece by piece through some of those groups. Elena, you've been out talking to young voters all this year. As you combed through the exit polls, were they one of the groups Domenico was just talking about who shifted toward Trump?
Oh, yes. I mean, and Democrats have struggled with young voters all year, voters under 30. They were key to Joe Biden's victory 4 years ago, but as president, his approval really tanked with them. Harris made up some of that ground, but just couldn't replicate his 2020 numbers. She lost support in nearly every swing state compared to Biden. Take Michigan, for example. Trump actually won voters under 30 in this state. In 2020, Biden carried the group by more than 20 points, and pretty similar results in Wisconsin, too, but Harris, narrowly kept the group. But overall, Harris still won a majority of young voters nationwide, but this vote was much more split than in recent elections.
Domenico, what other shifts stood out to you?
Yeah, well, the movement among Latinos was really eye-opening. I mean, Democrats had been winning big margins with them. Their dominance with Latinos had been decreasing over the last few election cycles, but nothing like the drastic swing that we saw in this election. And Trump got a record share of Latinos, 46%. That's the highest for any Republican ever. When we dug into the state data, they may have made the difference in some places. They moved to the right by more than 20 points in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Nevada. And it wasn't just Latinos. It was also Asian American voters. In Nevada, for example, which Democrats had not lost in 20 years, Latinos and AAPI voters together made up about 1 in 4 voters. Latinos shifted 28 points in Trump's favor. AAPI voters swung 52 points. We had to check that math a few times because that was a stunner, and these groups continually cited prices as important reasons for their votes.
Elena, what about black voters and specifically black male voters? Because I recall, I think, pre-election polls showing that Trump was making up big gains with those people.
Yeah, I mean, it was a major question ahead of election night. Both Harris and Trump were pretty actively courting this group towards the end of the campaign. And we did see that shift to the right among a lot of black men in these key states. I mean, in Pennsylvania, they moved, they by more than 30 points to the right. In North Carolina, by nearly 25 points. Those are huge shifts. And it's worth noting, though, that black voters as a whole did not move away from Democrats at rates as large as, say, Latino voters, like Domenico was talking about. And that move for Latino voters was also led in part by Latino men nationwide.
Okay, so some interesting gender trends emerging there. I mean, big picture, these are groups that Democrats have relied on for years. We are seeing cracks in that support, if y'all have just outlined. Where do Democrats go from here? Where do Republicans go from here? Elena.
Well, there were some bright spots for Democrats. You know, they did make gains with seniors in a majority of these swing states, and that's pretty striking given that, you know, they had these losses with young voters. So that's something worth watching, especially since older voters are part of that high propensity voting bloc that, Domenico was talking about earlier. So we'll see if the party can kind of harness that moving forward. But even more than that, I think Democrats have to just re-examine how they talk about the issues on voters' minds. I mean, we know that the economy and immigration were these huge topics for people all across the country of different backgrounds. And Harris, did have an agenda on both of these topics, but it just didn't seem to stick. And instead, Trump got more voter trust on these same issues. And even more than that, I think Harris also didn't win enough voter trust on topics that people did associate with her, like abortion, which was an area that she really leaned into, especially with voters of color and young voters. So, though this message, especially on abortion rights, reproductive rights, did resonate with some groups like white women with college degrees, we saw that, it just wasn't enough. And so Democrats are going to have to look forward and see how their message, in addition to abortion, kind of can be moved forward.
Domenico, jump in here.
Yeah, a few big questions that I'm looking for going forward. First of all, can a Republican not named Trump replicate what Trump did in turning out white non-college voters, or is he simply a unique political figure? Can Republicans keep Latinos and Asian American voters in the tent, or was their support just based on some of these negative environmental issues that Elena was talking about? And, can a Democrat come out in 2028 with some charisma, win these groups back with a vision for the country that isn't based on Trump, because they can't just be a party of the elites? It's going to be really interesting and kind of exciting to see what's birthed politically 4 years from now, because no matter what, it's going to be different.
Yep.
NPR senior political editor and correspondent Domenico Montanaro and NPR political reporter Elena Moore. Thanks to you both.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When you don't vote, you can't sit on a jury. You have no right to complain about the police because you won't even go and vote so you can even sit on a jury. As I've said to the cows when I first started to call in, I spent 11 years on a job where I worked for a bank and had to sit in court day after day after day after day. And I watched them select juries. I watched black people going to jail, black people having white probation officers, and the whole judicial system just truncated with white supremacy. And a great deal of it is some of it could be lessened if black people simply voted.
It's Saturday afternoon in Atlanta, and a group of 8 educated and accomplished African-American women are also talking about life after the November general election. Sitting around a brunch table in a lively Midtown restaurant, I learned all supported Kamala Harris. Not one is disputing the results that earned Donald Trump another stay in the White House. There are no thoughts that the election was any way unfair. Their conversation centered around God and country and how one of the strongest voting blocs in America, African-American women, how they will navigate a future they find murky at best.
I don't base my life based on who's in the White House. My life is based on God's Word, and I'm trying to fulfill what God has for me. So I don't worry about who's there. What I do, my biggest concern is about the people that will suffer. I'm concerned about the least of those.
Do you think the system is broken? The system is absolutely broken. As an African American woman, my faith is an educated African American woman. My faith is, as my friend at the table says, my faith is in God. However, what I hope all African Americans learn from this election is that we are all seen in the same pool of our ethnicity and our race. So though we may be in different socioeconomic pools or buckets, in the eyes of many that will be serving in the White House, we're seen as one. Where do we go from here? Collaboration. We have to trust each other more. There's such a lack of trust if we're going to have a real conversation among not us at this table, but those in general.
I think one of the things it's important that we address. I'm always good for a strategy going forward, but I don't want to leave anybody behind.
Exactly.
I'll never vote against the least of us. I am 50 years old. I'm 50 years old. I have 3 degrees. I have a doctorate. I've had a phenomenal career with some of the largest corporations on this planet, but I will never vote against the least of us. And that actually doesn't have to do with color for me. It has to do with the disabled, that has to do with the elderly, and that has to do with the children, People who don't have I have taken poll after poll after poll that says my vote should go in a different direction based on economic success. I override it every time because I will never vote against the least of us, because if you're 1%, you're leaving behind 99. But if you're 50%, you're still leaving behind half.
I think the election was a resounding understanding that people are not against you, they're for themselves. It is not about our better angels. And I think we need to get past that, and we have to recognize human nature. We have to, I think black women were awakened, all the allies, BIPOC, indigenous, people of color, Asians don't see an alignment with the black experience. And I think for black folks, we need to have an understanding of that. And we need to have an understanding about how we make our community better, how we trust each other.
So, last question. What is your mission now as black women moving forward? That's a good question.
Oh, I know mine, because we talked about this. I talked about this with my son the day after the election. And I know this may sound very, very, very like primitive, but I'm like, hey, we are going to be the healthiest we can be in this household. We are going to educate ourselves with the right materials in this household. We are going to save and make sure that we are financially secure in this household. And we're going to increase our giving in a way that if the government chooses not to, we know that we're doing our part to help society.
The women at the table agree that the only way for them personally to move forward is to accept the reality. One said, when someone shows you how they feel about African American women and their politics, believe them. And instead of trying to change their perception, band together and create sound trajectory. Amplifying Atlanta. This is listener-funded WABE.
Make me sick. I'm just sick of this, and I'm sick of you. So sick I don't know what to do with myself. Now I am just sick and tired. And tired always followed sick. Worst meeting I ever got in my life. My mother said, I am just sick. I said, and tired.
Black women have been essential to turning out the vote among young people, poor people, and people of color. Now, after Kamala Harris lost the chance to become the first black woman president, many black women organizers say they're exhausted and reevaluating. NPR's Ashley Lopez reports.
Cameron Davis works to get black and brown students living in the Philadelphia area engaged in politics. Her group organizes around issues like public education and voting rights.
So I had a baby in May, and I actually, came back a little bit earlier, because of just the chaos surrounding this election.
Davis cut her maternity leave short when President Biden dropped out because she felt it created an opening to engage students who until then were uninterested in the election. But ultimately, young voters were among many groups that swung towards President-elect Donald Trump this year. And Trump's platform is pretty much the complete opposite of what her group is working towards.
And the fact that I sacrificed my mind, body, and spirit to really just try to educate young people and to kind of see how the results played out and now the aftermath, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted as a black woman, as a mother, as a youth advocate, because I'm only 24 years old. I'm tired.
This is something that Khadija Kenner, who is with the New Pennsylvania Project, says she's been hearing a lot, which is why a lot of organizers are taking a break.
I think it's necessary to protect our own mental health in this moment. We can't be the protectors and defenders
of all people all the time.
For Black organizers, this time brings a mix of disappointments. Black voters largely backed Harris, even though many of their coalition partners, including Latinos and voters under 30, moved towards Trump. And in doing so, they cast their ballots against a Black woman.
I mean, I definitely think that coalition politics are always tricky, right?
That's Summer Foster, executive director of Michigan Voices, a voter mobilization group. She says it's hard getting groups of people with different cultures and needs to come together toward a common goal. But Black women like Foster have been doing the hard work of trying anyway.
Black women feel like that we have saved democracy over and over and over again. And sometimes we haven't seen the same solidarity coming from other communities, and folks are rethinking the best way to utilize resources and the best way to move forward.
In Philadelphia, Cameron Davis says for her, this could mean maybe being more selective about who her group works with.
What we do need to make sure is that we are also being prioritized in other people's agendas. And when it comes to coalition building, moving forward, we should not build coalitions with anybody that does not also care about the issues that are impacting our community.
Christina Greer, a political science professor at Fordham University, says this moment could have an impact on political organizing, but it's still too early to tell what that may look like.
We've never had a moment in this country where collectively Black women are like, you know what? I am working my tail off for this country that doesn't appreciate my efforts. It doesn't appreciate my intellectual input. It doesn't appreciate my blood, sweat, and tears. And so you guys can figure it out.
Many activists say they're regrouping, but still plan to do the work they've been doing for many years now. Angelique Hinton, the executive director of PA Youth Vote, says she too is disappointed with this election. But she says getting different voters to work together is still essential.
I am still very much interested because I know that we are stronger together, and I know we're in these same communities, and that, you know, when we build coalitions, we can together lift up issues.
Hinton says she thinks a lot of Black women who are taking a break right now will eventually come back to this type of political work. She just thinks it might take a while. Ashley Lopez, NPR News.
You know, and I'll never forget after one of our championships, Frank says, "Hey, Russ, after the season's over, why don't you come down and spend a week with me down in Kentucky?" I said, "Frank, you're a good guy. There's no way in hell I'm going to go spend a week in Kentucky."
At an event earlier this month, University of Louisville professor Ricky Jones read out the names of 13 Kentucky legislators, deeming them, quote, white supremacists for their rebuking of John Marshall, JCPS's chief equity officer, and for supporting anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion legislation in Kentucky. I spoke to Jones about his defense of Marshall and the state of anti-DEI efforts in Kentucky. Marshall posted to X, formerly Twitter, about conversations he's had recently with other Black professionals after the election of Donald Trump for a second term, and in light of recent decisions for companies and institutions to abandon or step back from previous commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Can we get into why you thought people felt upset or felt a kind of discomfort around Marshall's statement?
Well, they felt discomfort around the statement because Kentucky in general, Louisville in particular, has a very serious problem with dealing with the reality of white supremacy in this space. And I'm not, talking about some elementary cartoonish definition of white supremacy, with the Ku Klux Klan running around in robes or white nationalists marching through Charlottesville saying Jews would not replace us. I'm talking about whites who feel that they and only they, at the end of the day, are the only ones who have the right to think, know, and decide. Think about what the problems in the area are, know what the proper solutions are, and then decide what's going to be done. The terminal decision makers here are almost all white. No Black person really comes to mind outside of, Black churches, Simmons College of Kentucky, places like that. The decision makers are white. And the reality of it is Blacks in the area live in a state of fear. They do feel that if they ever say anything of any consequence that pushes back against the reality of white dominance in the city, that they'll be punished. And so the John Marshall situation was simply an example of that. And I, for one, was not willing to allow him to be out there by himself.
Let's talk about the anti-DEI legislation. It's been popularly framed as a backlash to 2020, and because you did call it a white supremacist legislation, could you contextualize that in terms of what you meant?
Yes, I mean, it runs back, and people say, okay, this is a backlash to 2020. Okay, maybe to some degree when you look at it on the micro level. But when you look at it on the macro level, it's really a continuation of white backlash that we've seen in the country since its founding. You know, you look at 1865 with the passage of the 13th Amendment, there was backlash. 3 years later, the 14th Amendment, backlash. You look at Reconstruction, backlash. Civil rights movement, backlash. I mean, we constantly see white backlash in different iterations. So that's why when people bring up DEI, which is really just another term that people use to try to fight for racial equality, and folk talk about the harm that DEI is. So remember, this stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So folk are saying we are against that, and they talk about the evils of DEI, that the country is somehow a merit-based country, like whiteness has never benefited them. I refuse to have conversations about DEI. I refuse to frame it in that way, because what this really is the reaffirmation of white supremacy in American education. So that's why it's very, very hard to believe when people in Kentucky, whether it's the governor or the mayor of any city or business leaders, say, we want change, we believe in diversity, when they don't say a word when these things happen. And the same with college presidents and university presidents. They don't say a word. They'll shut down their diversity offices, or they'll put diversity officers in place who won't resist. So to me, that's the quintessence of evil, to behave in this way, right, to allow this type of stuff to go on and not even have legitimate conversation about it.
As a callback to what John Marshall said, and the response to it by legislators was that this was stoking division. But yeah, I'm curious about what we lose when we don't get curious or actually interrogate maintaining that status quo.
Well, what you lose, put simply, is the possibility for progress, the possibility for change, the possibility for equality, the possibility of becoming a truly cosmopolitan city or state that is welcoming to all. You know, you're going to be stuck in an ideological mire that is not going to change.
This question, why is this stuff happening? The New York Times editorial today. The Trump effect. See, this is what I'm doing with my money, buying newspapers like Dick Gregory. The Trump effect and how it spreads. It says we are on the brink, under Trump, on the brink of fascism. New York Times, all the news that's fit to print, editorial 12/10/2015. I say fascism is end-stage white supremacy. See, just like in Nazi Germany. Fascism, system of racism, white supremacy, determined to survive.
After the presidential election, there was a spike in incidents involving neo-Nazi marches and racist and hateful messages sent online, stoking fear for people in a number of states across the country. Stephanie Tsai has more on this. It's part of our Race Matters coverage.
William, in Waterloo, Iowa, earlier this month, some residents received flyers advertising the Aryan Freedom Network. That same week in Michigan, men waved Nazi flags outside a community theater production of The Diary of Anne Frank. Days later, in Columbus, Ohio, a small group of neo-Nazi men carried swastika flags. And since the election, Black, Latino, and LGBTQ Americans in at least 25 states, including kids and teens, have been subjected to racist text messages. The messages told recipients to report to a plantation to pick cotton. Destiny LeGrone, a New Yorker, was one of the recipients of those texts.
I truly felt fearful because this was the day after the election. I didn't know if the winner of the election gave the authority for people to push hate, but then also fearing for my safety in the sense of who was able to obtain my information and violate my personal space, as in contacting me to send such a thing. Who has that type of hate in their heart?
For more on these incidents and what can be done, I'm joined by Margaret Huang, President and CEO of the Southern Poverty Law Center, an organization that monitors hate and extremism in the U.S. Margaret, thank you so much for joining the NewsHour. As you know, the FBI is investigating those texts, but as of now, we have no clearer sense of who sent them. Based on the content, Margaret, what do you make of these mass texts, and what is the intention behind them?
It's really clear to us that hate and extremist groups are using the election of Donald Trump as an encouragement to cause fear and anxiety in communities of color, in religious communities, and in the LGBTQ community. Because of his use of racist, sexist, and other discriminatory rhetoric on the campaign trail, he's essentially encouraged his followers to spew hateful rhetoric, and he's emboldened them to embrace this hateful ideology.
You know, even if Trump has stirred up feelings of racial animus, he also saw gains, as you know, in this election among Latinos and African Americans. With the second Trump term, do you expect that there will be more or less tolerance for this kind of hate speech?
I think that many people who supported the president-elect did so because they share his rhetoric and ideology, but many other people did not. Many people voted for him for economic reasons because they're frustrated by the economic situation of the country, and they wanted a change from what they were experiencing over the last few years. That is not a mandate to embrace racial hatred or misogyny. And I believe, in fact, that as we move forward with the incoming administration, more and more people are going to reject that rhetoric and call for a change.
These mass text messages that were sent out, that seems unprecedented. And we were hearing of middle schoolers who received these texts. What can be done about that?
So we actually spoke with students from across the country, including students from the University of Alabama, Troy University, University of West Georgia, and Alabama State. We also spoke with a 13-year-old in DeKalb County, Georgia, and a 14-year-old in Rockdale County. It is very clear to us that the texts have been collected and sold by first from an international company to a domestic company, and then we've been unable to trace those texts, who purchased the text from that U.S. company subsequently. We think that internet companies that do this mass text service need better regulations to ensure that they can report who is using those numbers they've purchased for these kinds of activities. And the FBI is currently investigating this trail of who purchased the text.
Separately, white supremacist incidents like the ones we just described have been rising for the last 18 months. What would you attribute that to?
I think, again, so much of that was heard on the campaign trail from the candidate Trump himself. I think that's what spurs so many other people to feel emboldened to embrace that rhetoric. And I think we're going to see more of it for a time, particularly as Trump nominates people for senior level positions in his administration who also echo that hateful rhetoric. We're going to see more and more people openly embracing it. But I will also note those incidents that you mentioned, Stephanie, where there were people marching or flyering. So far, those people have not sought to be identified. They don't have the courage to identify with that rhetoric. They just want to cause the fear that such activities usually spur. And so it's important for people to stand proud in their communities and to reject this hateful rhetoric.
In this country, hate speech, including the display of swastikas, Nazi symbols, are all protected by the First Amendment. What laws do come into play based on the incidents we've described?
There has been violence. And of course, on the campaign trail, there were also incidences of violence. I think that is, in fact, the intention of these organizations. They hope that this rhetoric and these hateful acts will actually encourage individuals to take action. And that's why it's so important for us to focus on prevention and to speak out against hateful rhetoric whenever we can. We need leaders in communities across the country, whether they're political, whether they're religious, whether they're community leaders, to speak out against hateful rhetoric and to reject any kind of that intolerance in their communities.
Margaret Huang with the Southern Poverty Law Center in Montgomery, Alabama. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, I heard a segment on NPR, and it was about, I don't know whether it was a prison or a jail, but definitely greater confinement in the state called Georgia, and they have a pilot program where they're using what they call jail bots. It's I think they said they were 6 feet tall robots that were rolling around tracking inmates. It's pretty easy to find a segment on NPR. A white man said something on there that it really, I doubt the truthfulness of his statement. He said, there will be no reason for concern.
6-foot-tall robots are now monitoring inmates at a county jail in Georgia. These jail bots are part of a pilot program that relies on artificial intelligence like facial recognition to track inmate whereabouts. From member station WABE, Shemaine Cruz reports.
In the Atlanta suburb of Cobb County, Sheriff Craig Owens says his 3 new assistants don't have names yet, but they do know his.
Sheriff Owens, we meet again. We sure do.
Owens is chatting with a tall-wheeled robot resembling the metallic hero R2-D2 from Star Wars. It's equipped with several 360-degree cameras, night vision, heat detection, and it talks. Owens says all 3 jail bots will take turns patrolling the jail to ensure inmates are where they're supposed to be at all times.
There'll be no reason for concern. The robots will not really come in contact with them. It'll be a mechanism and it says a central robot on duty. Please stand back 20 feet, 30 feet. Do not touch.
During this recent demonstration at the jail, no inmates were in the halls or in their cells. Owen says the robots will be supervised remotely by jail staff who can react to what they see, and inmates can talk to staff directly through the machines. The sheriff says the robots will especially help with medical emergencies and staffing shortages. They'll be closely watched by Tarika Ganzi. She's the executive director of the Southern Center for Human Rights, and has her doubts.
Anytime you get to a place where you have to bring in robots to monitor the jail, then that, for me, is a red flag that the facility and the people who are running it are not doing what they're supposed to do in terms of protecting people and caring for the people who are in their custody.
This 90-day pilot program is the first real-life trial of these jail bots, according to its manufacturer, Deca Research and Development. Ganzi says she doesn't think robots will cure chronic understaffing in jails, but they could create privacy issues due to a lack of guardrails.
What limitations are on the manufacturer for keeping the data, and any safeguards that are put in place for protecting the information of people who are incarcerated, who are being monitored without their consent.
And there is no clear answer to that, says Neil Parsons. He's a researcher for the Justice Department. Parsons says there are no federal or state laws yet regulating AI in jails. And that's why Cobb County's jailbot trial stands out.
They may be facilitating the guardrails for other agencies and other correctional facilities down the road.
For now, the robots at the Cobb County Jail are operating for free, and the information and data they gather is stored with the manufacturer. Once the pilot is over, the sheriff will decide whether or not to keep them, but Deca Research has not told him how much that would cost. For NPR News, I'm Shemaine Cruz in Atlanta.
Don't forget your nigger knocker.
Federal consent decrees can be a powerful legal tool to reform police departments. When former President Trump takes office again in January, the fate of investigations the Biden administration opened into police misconduct will become uncertain. NPR criminal justice reporter Meg Anderson is here to tell us more about the possible future of these agreements. Hey, Meg.
Hey, Ari.
Explain what a consent decree is and what it does.
Yeah, so it's basically an improvement plan for troubled police departments. It typically starts with a federal investigation, and then the Justice Department and usually a city negotiate a legally binding plan for systemic reform. A federal monitor makes sure that that plan is then carried out. The evidence, though, is kind of mixed on how effective they are. A main criticism is that these agreements can be very expensive to carry out, and they can stay in place for years. A judge decides whether a city has made the necessary changes. So Seattle, for instance, has been under its decree for more than a decade and has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on it.
And how have presidents tended to use consent decrees to change policing and police culture?
So the Obama Justice Department really popularized them, and then Trump's Justice Department severely limited their use. They only opened one investigation during his time in office. Biden's DOJ has opened 12 investigations, including in Louisville, Minneapolis, and Memphis, where police killed Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Tyree Nichols, respectively. But none of those Biden investigations has been finalized into a decree.
Why would that be?
So a senior justice official that I spoke with said that these investigations just take longer nowadays than they did during the Obama years. There's just so much more digital evidence today, tons of body-worn camera footage, for instance. Christy Lopez, though, says that doesn't totally explain it. She's a professor at Georgetown University, and under Obama, she was deputy chief in the DOJ division in charge of these decrees.
There does not appear to have been the sense of urgency that we felt during the Obama administration. We really tried to get the investigations done within a year and the consent decrees done within a year after that. And I just don't see that happening here.
Well, Biden's got a couple more months in office. Are they going to try to button these up or what?
Yeah, so some legal experts I spoke to said that they don't think cities have much incentive to keep negotiating with the DOJ if they can kind of just wait it out. But, we are seeing some evidence of movement from the DOJ. Last week on Thursday, the Justice Department released findings in its investigation into Trenton, New Jersey's police department, where it found widespread misconduct. And officials in Louisville and Minneapolis have been negotiating with the DOJ for months, so it is possible that those agreements will be finalized before Trump's inauguration. And the DOJ says to stay tuned on that and other matters.
And then looking ahead after the inauguration, if the Trump administration stops federal investigations into police misconduct, what happens then?
Well, communities can push for reform on their own at the local level. I spoke with Justin Terrell about that. He's the executive director of the Minnesota Justice Research Center.
No one is coming to save you. If you're thinking the DOJ is going to save you, even if they negotiate an agreement, it is just another tool. And the tool is only as good as the person using it.
So states can pursue police reform too. Minnesota, for instance, already has a consent decree with the city of Minneapolis that the state began to put that in place the last time that Trump was in office. But experts say that federal consent decrees send a strong message that no one is above the law, including the police.
That's NPR's Meg Anderson. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't want us to lose sight that things are getting better. Each successive generation seems to be making progress in changing attitudes when it comes to race. Doesn't mean we're in a post-racial society. It doesn't mean that racism is eliminated. But when I talk to Malia and Sasha, and I listen to their friends and I see them interact, they're better than we are. They're better than we were on these issues. And that's true in every community that I've visited all across the country.
Story that's making headlines across the state. This is what was left inside a Colorado high school locker room for a visiting football team to find ahead of a big playoff game. Racial and homophobic slurs written in what appears to be dust. This happened at Montrose High School before the 4A quarterfinal game against Mesa Ridge over the weekend. 11 News anchor Grace Kramer has been following the story. Grace, Montrose will go on to play in the semifinals this weekend.
Lindsay, Colorado High School Activities Association tells us that this is being handled at the school level. A spokesperson with Montrose School District tells me tonight that they have conducted a thorough investigation, adding that no Montrose football players were involved in these messages. I also spoke with several members of the Mesa Ridge football team, including the one who took this very video. They tell me tonight that nothing could have prepared them for what they saw.
Being a minority in Colorado, you know, it's already hard, all this going on and stuff like that. And just stacking that on top of it for the game, you know, it didn't make nothing easy.
Going into a playoff game, I expect like trash talk, you know, high emotions, all that. But to be met in a locker room with like this type of fashion is just so unexpected.
This was the scene dozens of Mesa Ridge football players were confronted with on Saturday ahead of the 4A quarterfinal playoff game.
Definitely a mixture of everything, like anger, sadness, like confused on why they did this.
Those hateful messages stuck with some as they headed onto the field in Montrose. The Grizzlies lost that matchup to the Red Hawks 53-21, but for players like Xander, that game was over well before it started.
It's bigger than win and loss. It's just humanity at this point. That stuff should never happen.
Now, some Mesa Ridge parents are demanding that those behind the hate speech be held accountable.
I'm hurt and I'm sad because kids shouldn't have to experience such things. This is something a child should not go through in their high school years.
This was my son's senior year. This was his last game. We're going to do right. We're going to make this right.
Montrose School District denies that any of its players were involved, saying in part, quote, "We reviewed surveillance footage from the 24 hours prior to the football game. The footage confirmed that no Montrose High School football players entered the locker room in question." And in an email sent to me by a parent, Mesa Ridge leadership says that they will continue to look into the situation. Quote, "As a school and district, the safety of our students is of the utmost importance. We as leaders will continue to follow through on the situation." And the Mesa Ridge principal tells me in part, quote, "Our athletes deserve to compete in a safe and supportive environment, free from hate and intimidation."
I hope no one ever has to deal with this ever again. But yeah, just try to fight through it as best you can.
Several Mesa Ridge parents tell me that they did file police reports, and we have a full list of statements from CHSA, Montrose School District, as well as Mesa Ridge High School in this story on our website, kktv.com. Lindsay.
All right, Grace, thanks for the update.
5, 4, 3. She's pure alligator, pure white.
2. Albinos that do make it to reproductive age can't find a mate because they look funny.
1. Albino affairs.
To the animal that has captivated Kaukauna.
With gun deer season fast approaching, there is at least one deer in the area that hunters must avoid. Local 5's Timothy Leteau explains why.
Kaukauna might be the home of the galloping ghosts, but this year it's also the residence of a ghost in the woods.
When he came out, I thought he was a horse that got loose, because you just don't normally see something that's white like that, and then through the binoculars I could see it was a white buck.
Photographer Dawn Wiege has seen a lot of deer in Kaukauna, but never has she been captivated by one like this.
Literally, it was like looking at a ghost walking through the woods. And I call him my ghost in the woods. That's what I named him.
After a couple of hours of searching the Kaukauna forests and fields myself, I couldn't find the buck. But Dawn says that she has seen the buck almost weekly since midsummer.
They're becoming more common, so it's not a far cry for people to see a white deer on the landscape.
That's a result of hereditary traits being successfully passed to offspring through breeding. With gun deer season around the corner, hunters need to take note that it is illegal to hunt any type of albino or white deer.
If a deer is all white, white fur, you cannot harvest that deer during the hunting season. Even though it may have like a little bit of brown on its tarsal gland or the top of its head, that's still considered a white deer. And all white deer are protected in Wisconsin.
It's been a tough year for Dawn as she faces serious health issues. One thing getting her through the dark days has been that bright ghost in the woods.
It's like God telling you things are okay. You know, it's going to be all right. I would be devastated if something happened to him.
In Kaukauna, Timothy Leteau, Local 5 News.
The DNR told Timothy, when in doubt about the animal's color, do not shoot. If you're wrong, you could lose your license, be hit with fines, and maybe even wind up behind bars.
Man, can we hear that one more time? Can we get a lifetime rewind on albino affairs? Man. With one more time for albino affairs. Let's see if we can do it in a timely manner. I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss. Wow. Albino affairs. One more time. Thank you for tolerating old ignorant Gus T. One more time. Ghost in the woods. Albino affairs. Dr. Welsing, whole reason we have albino affairs. One more time. Ghost in the woods.
To the animal that has captivated Kaukauna.
With gun deer season fast approaching, there is at least one deer in the area that hunters must avoid. Local 5's Timothy Leteau explains why.
Kaukauna might be the home of the galloping ghosts, but this year it's also the residence of a ghost in the woods.
When he came out, I thought he was a horse that got loose, because you just don't normally see something that's white like that. And then through the binoculars, I could see it was a white buck.
Photographer Dawn Wiege has seen a lot of deer in Kaukauna, but never has she been captivated by one like this.
Literally, it was like looking at a ghost walking through the woods. And I call him my ghost in the woods. That's what I named him.
After a couple of hours of searching the Kaukauna forests and fields myself, I couldn't find the buck. But Dawn says that she has seen the buck almost weekly since midsummer.
They're becoming more common, so it's not a far cry for people to see a white deer on the landscape.
That's a result of hereditary traits being successfully passed to offspring through breeding. With gun deer season around the corner, hunters need to take note that it is illegal to hunt any type of albino or white deer.
If a deer is all white, white fur, you cannot harvest that deer during the hunting season. Even though it may have like a little bit of brown on its tarsal gland or the top of its head, that's still considered a white deer. And all white deer are protected in Wisconsin.
It's been a tough year for Dawn as she faces serious health issues. One thing getting her through the dark days has been that bright ghost in the woods.
It's like God telling you things are okay. You know, it's going to be all right. I would be devastated if something happened to him.
In Kaukauna, Timothy Leteau, Local 5 News.
The DNR told Timothy, when in doubt about the animal's color, do not shoot. If you're wrong, you could lose your license, be hit with fines, and maybe even wind up behind bars.
Dr. Francis Cress-Welsing, I almost feel like I need to hear the third time. Third time, almost. When in doubt about the animal's color, don't you dare. Come on. You lose your license. I've never heard that before in my life. You go out, let's say you go out and don't have a license, and you shoot one of them regular old nigger bucks. What do they do then? Do they put you in jail? Do they flog you, publicly shame you, dox you, publish all your parents' information and everybody so they can come by and, boo and make noises in front of their residence? If it's white or albino, they even covered all the bases. Even if it's not, for real, albino. Even if it's a teaspoon of melanin on the hind parts, the hoof, nose, whatever. That's close enough. What sort of laws do they have in place to make sure, like, hey, you cannot be messing around and messing over Leroy. No messing over messed up or black children. How about that at least? No messing up black children. You mess around with a black child, ooh-wee, you are fixing to get it. They don't have nothing like that. Albino or white buck. Shh. Spiritual thing. Oh my God. White. Safe. Negro on the other. Dr. Welsing talked about that, man. They had the albino ape Snowflake, and they have an homage to Snowflake in Planet of the Apes. I don't remember which one it is, like the reboot in the last like decade or so. I don't remember the exact film, but there's Snowflake one more time. But Dr. Welsing talked about to acquire, and they have all these papers and reports and documentaries and you name it, journal articles on Snowflake, and they said to acquire Snowflake, they killed all these other Negro apes, had melanin, color. They killed all them and saved Snowflake, the albino ape. They could have used tranquilizers and all that, something gnarly. Get out of here, Negro. System of white supremacy. And we've heard the same thing with albino squirrels and what have you, that they have laws, they have rules and protections in place. We will publicly flog you, beat you, put you in jail, take you, and I mean, that is like symbolic castration to a degree. Take your life? Like, what? I'm a white man. I'm supposed to be able to go out and kill you? Mean you're going to take my life? What? What? Oh, my God. Messed around, and it doesn't even have to be an albino. But you just got a white one. It had the brown on the tail. Close enough. Close enough. You ought to be shamed. Shooting white bucks. We got niggers around here for you to shoot. You shooting white bucks. Ought to be shamed. She said she would be devastated if something happened to the ghost of the woods. Talking about the white buck. Who is devastated? Eric Garner. John Crawford. Who is devastated? Their parents, and then the rest of us just, well, I do remember that time he stole a half carton of eggs. You know, Leroy. As a matter of fact, I can put the exact name in because they got articles that say, you know, that Michael Brown Jr., you know, he was no angel. They don't have no spiritual connotations or, oh, it's devastating. He was no. We put him out there, put his carcass out there with the Negro apes. Yeah, we gonna go see Snowflake one more time. Man, let that wash your giblets and cranberry sauce down for the holiday weekend. Compensate. Hey, that is what we missed. Gus T out cutting a fool. L.A. saw USC pop up to there's a man. I was right there. And they did the correct thing. They pulled out and they showed the grounds of USC and the surrounding LA area, and it looked like a desert. I said, there you go. That's what you do. That's how you show LA, the smog and all that foolishness. They showed Griffith Observatory. I was stunned because that was a landmark I used to navigate while I was in Los Angeles. I said, wow, that is crazy. Anyway, but I did see old lame USC fight on one of the California institutions that I visited, one of the California institutions that has quite a bit of Jonestown information. They did have People's Temple in Los Angeles, so white people study everything. I even forgot to tell you all, when I went to USC, as I stepped off the plane, I got there and their lane football team was having practice. I graduated from a Division I school, and just on my California sojourn alone, I visited UCLA, Stanford, and UC Berkeley in addition to USC. So I saw a lot of schools that have Division I programs. I live in Seattle. I visit the University of Washington all the time. Their football team played in the national championship game just this year. So I'm very familiar with Division I campuses, football programs, all of that. These dudes, one of the football players walked out. I don't think it was the quarterback or whatever. I don't watch USC football games, so I can't pick out, all their players and whatever. But I do read the LA Times where they have been talking about firing the coach because the team is lame, and they lost again today. One of the football players walked out as I'm getting ready to go see the screening of War Games. The police officer leaps out to escort this football player across the street in the crosswalk. I was stunned. Now I could see maybe if this was the quarterback, Bronny James was just at USC last year. If this is maybe I could. If the team was undefeated, they're about to be in the playoffs. That's maybe, but I mean, then we're on the campus now. I don't know if people have been to USC or not. This is like a restricted campus. You just can't roll up, on campus. Maybe they let, Snoop roll in, but you just can't be anybody off the street and roll up on the campus of USC. Even students, whatever, you got to show identification to even get on the campus. That's one. Where this player was exiting, this is not some place where you got all kinds of traffic and people speeding through the campus, going 30 miles an hour, and they're like, not at all. And he got man, woo, I can't even imagine what it would have been like for O.J. Simpson. They were actually good, and he was actually Heisman Trophy winners. I can't even imagine what the escort and all that would look like for Reggie Bush and that sort of thing. Like, Jesus Christ. Woo! Anyway, fight on, Trojans. Football team still lame, brain damage all the way. Now, I did grasp the value of the compensatory call-in way before the California trip, just for myself and others, because a lot of non-white people, have acknowledged that they don't have time, or they just, don't train themselves. They don't make time. They don't value checking the news, so they appreciate at least having some access to news and information, the little bit that we can provide on the compensatory call-in, because I think that is so important. That's something that Dr. Welsing, Dick Gregory, Neely Fuller Jr., Dr. Cambon, and so many other folks that we esteem, that's something that they talk about and value all the time, being aware of current events. If you don't want to read the newspaper, no problem. You can listen to the news. You can watch the news. People love YouTube. Most of the news channels, they have a YouTube channel. You can go at minimum, your local news, which should, extend to your state at minimum. I'm going to pay attention to that. That's especially if you live somewhere where they have weather events. I think we had folks who told us back when Hurricane Helene, some of the other major catastrophes that happened here in this part of the world, northwestern hemisphere, when they happened just a few months back, said that people in their area seemed unaware that these storms were about to happen, and that people had been talking about the possibility and major destruction. People seemed unaware. That does not surprise me at all. Strive not to be that. Do not just be all about TV and entertainment, and Netflix and all the rest. Hey, we are in a poor state, worthy of great pity. We need to do some serious studying and just being aware of what is happening around us. All of the technology and everything else, especially if you have children, like, my goodness, that is not the example that you want to set. Being uninformed and last person to find out really important, life-altering information, you find out when it's too late. That's not the example that you want to set if you have offspring. You want to be about information, being informed, like I said, studying, research project, especially local research projects that can be a lifelong piece of investigating with your offspring. Attempted family or whatever, or personal project. Anywho, weekly compensatory call-in back. Today's date, Saturday, November 30, 2024. So I have been told. Hopefully people navigated the so-called holiday in a constructive manner, not eating a whole lot of bad food, not having conflict with attempted family, and just sitting around watching Brain Damage and stuffing down chitlins and all the rest of it. Hopefully, if you did not have to work a few of the days, although a lot of people get like Monday and Friday, might get those days off, might not have to go back in until Monday. If you are in that number, hey, take advantage. Hopefully you can get some quality rest. Maybe you can even take some of that time and make some quality food. You can even make that a part of the counter-racism science. You have attempted offspring. We can cook together. We can find some recipes and what have you. If we used to eat really bad food for the holidays, we can make more healthful menu items together. Maybe we'll make it 2 or 3 times, see if we can get it, perfected, where we really, bang, we got it together nice and don't have to blow up the kitchen or anything like that. Comes out great. Everybody likes it. Doesn't turn our hair any funny colors. And, we maybe have leftovers. Whoopee. We eat some good food. We rest. Take it, and maybe even do some cleaning, right? Break the leaves or whatever else. Constructive use of time and energy. If people that you work with are not calling to disrupt, accuse, all the rest during your holiday off time. Not for spectators, the number to dial 605-313-5164. The code 564943 #. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 #. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Now, folks, thoughts, observations, make sure that I get to say again, and even keeping in mind what I said, because I think that's a part of the calculus, if you will, in terms of, or at least for me, how I process. Is it constructive, Gus T going to hang out in California to research Jonestown for 30 days and disrupt the broadcast schedule and all of that? We, weren't even able to do the compensatory call-in every week. First one that we've done in 2 weeks' time. Part of the thinking in whether or not that is constructive, what are you going to get from all of this in terms of time down there? Whew, haven't even had an opportunity to look at everything. Really, and even might have more tidbits coming with things being digitized, but wow. Wow. Thus far, I would say yes, constructive. We can get back on schedule with the program and letting folks know we should be back to regular broadcast schedule, but wow, I would say it was super constructive. Just, it's one thing, white people are more informed and blah, blah, blah. It is very different. A subject, like I said, I've been telling you, we started covering Jonestown and going to Seattle Library and researching and blah, blah, blah. One payoff that I just utilized, my computer still loads the catalog like I'm at Cal Berkeley. So I have been feverishly downloading and getting articles that I would not have had access to if it loaded normally like I was here in Seattle, even if it loaded like I was at the University of Washington, which is great, which opens up a lot more access. But wow, it is nothing like the access that they have down in California. Woo, what a place to research. All kinds of things, not just Jonestown, all kinds of things in the world, just as Dr. William Shockley intended. That's Palo Alto specific. Stanford, their football team is lame too, but that was not intended to be a brain damage unit. Not at all. Stanford is quiet, refining white supremacy, racism. Real talk, at Stanford, we are quietly studying Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, even. Shh. Silicon Valley, indeed. Quietest place I have ever been. Major university, middle of the daytime, school enrolled. Race soldiers thinking. That's what I thought the whole time I was there. Woo. That's Palo Alto. Let's see. Number one, correction from yesterday when I was giving details about my California sojourn and thanking investors for supporting, making it possible for a broke Negro to stay in expensive and two of the more expensive parts of California. I guess Malibu, but that's why I did go to Malibu. I guess it would have been more expensive, but I stayed in Malibu for a week or 30 days or whatever the case. But LA and San Francisco, two of the more expensive parts of California to hang out in. Thanks again. Tremendous gratitude to the folks who made it all possible, hopefully worthy of the time and energy and disruption to the book club and everything else. Again, man, I even thought about that. The book club should be mandatory. If you listen to the C.O.W.S book club is so, at least for myself, and I think for others, amazing. One, we don't read fiction. We read actual things where you could actually go and research. You could actually go to Buffalo and, 22 caliber killer, you say? You could actually go to San Francisco, People's Temple, Geary Boulevard. These are real events, aspects of white supremacy, racism, where you could go and learn lots of information. Learn as much as you can to improve your understanding of white supremacy, racism, counter racism, hopefully how we can go about solving this problem. I cannot stress enough one of the major things. Wow, how extraordinarily uninformed non-white people, myself included, myself first and foremost, because I didn't, know all this information until we started reading this book in the Catherine Massey Book Club. But how astronomically uninformed we are about everything, racism, everything. And then look at white people. Boxes. Like I said, I go to California. I have 3,000 files on Jonestown and books and newspaper articles and blah, 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 blah. Man, these white people have boxes and boxes and boxes. And what Fuller say where they go to the bottom of the ocean, it is one thing to hear that metaphor, to see that. Now, how does this apply to Jonestown? Oh. Come here, boy. Let me ask you some questions about what your time was down in Guyana. Now, tell me all about how Jim Jones raped you. Come here, boy. I know it's been a year, but I want to talk to you and see if any memories or recollections have come back to you. Oh. Study everything and then study everything and then include this in how they teach white people about racism. I got to say it that way because, hey, I told you, Dr. Zimbardo, he had the slide. It said black prisoners with the picture from Jonestown, the massacre with the dead bodies and such. It didn't say multiracial or none of that. It said black prisoners. That's why I said more to come, because that was one that I said, I need this digitized. And then got that, like I said, oh my God, I wish he had the lectures, because if this fast forwarded like 35 years, 40 years, there would be a recording of the lecture of how he taught this. Oh my, how do you teach? Because you got the slides next to each other, so you relate all this content together. How do you teach a class about Jonestown and Nazi Germany where you show a slide where it's labeled black prisoners from Jonestown and then you show Nazi Germany? Holocaust, the little white children giving the salute and all that. How do you connect this? Let me hear it in the class for your white students. Who took this class? Like, where are they at? Let me get some of their notes, some of the white students at Stanford that took Dr. Zimbardo. And this is a class on brainwashing, mind control. And then they tell, man, white people is ignorant about racism. Man, if anybody is ignorant about everything, it is black people. Put Gus T at the top of those. I told you I didn't even process it because I saw that book twice. Was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment? White people had that book a long time ago. A long time. I so wish I had slowed down. Copy it anyway so you can see what notes did they take in this book. What we heard today. Correction number one, when I was talking about all this on the program 2 days ago, young lady dialed in to tell us about the book C.O.W.S, about the CIA and Charles Manson, and I thought that was the book Jeff Ginn wrote because he also wrote a book about Charles Manson, but this is by Tom O'Neill, and I think she mentioned that on the program. I just got conflated about two different books, both on Charles Manson, but that C.O.W.S book is Tom O'Neill. I do have that book, and I thought about reading that book after we read Was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment? But we read The Children of Jonestown instead, and they have a full documentary by the same title, The Children of Jonestown. Some of these white doctors, not Dr. Welsing, who was a child and general psychiatrist. She didn't get to talk to any of these children, unless I've been misinformed. I think that's when she would have told us, right? She talked to us about Jonestown a number of times. I think she would have told us if she got to talk to some of these people, right? Maybe not. I don't think so. I think she would have told us. These white doctors, UCLA, Stanford, Berkeley, they got to talk to these children of Jonestown and took notes on it, sometimes made recordings of it. Ignorant about racism, indeed. That first segment that we heard today, Mumia Abu-Jamal, long time in greater confinement in the great state of Pennsylvania, what they call swing state that went for Donald Trump. He was on death row for many decades in Pennsylvania. He did the segment where he was talking about these individuals who are classified as gay being killed and made reference to Matthew Shepard. One, he made reference in the state of Virginia to a black male being burned and decapitated. I couldn't find who he was talking about. That's why I'm always a fan. Give the name. Give the name. Can be challenging if you're speaking in an extemporaneous manner, but if you have time, like this is written out or what have you, give the name. You never know. People might be hearing this, 10 years from now, 10 months from now, or might be hearing about this for the first time. So if you can give it enough detail where they can at least go and do more investigating if they so choose. But I could not find who is this black person who was burned and decapitated in the great state of, I mean, I talk about a worthless Negro from Virginia. Who was this? If anyone can, find it, was this a more recent case, like in the last 10, 15 years or so? Was this an older case? Because he said that this report was talking about an incident that happened to a person classified as gay a number of years ago in the state of Virginia. Anyone who mentions Matthew Shepard, it really piques my interest in a really non-constructive manner. We did the program, the Book of Matt, with the author of the Book of Matt, journalist for the New York Times, unless my memory is in error, where he told us, I investigated this case. This was not a hate crime. And he said people were resistant to just factual, accurate information about what this was. People were resistant. We want to report, and this is a hate crime, and they did this. They killed this all-American white boy out in Wyoming because he was gay. And no, Mr. Jimenez, no, that is not what the facts say. I went out here, I've investigated. That is not what the facts reveal. They didn't want to talk about that. My interest is piqued, and particularly with Mumia Abu-Jamal, and they even have a new documentary talking about all this as well. But my interest was piqued specifically with Mumia Abu-Jamal because privileged black male, greater confinement. I've noted a number of times he often does not say white supremacy. He uses other terms. He'll talk about capitalism, and he'll use different ways of describing the problem. I'm not saying that he never says white supremacy. I'm just saying that it's kind of infrequent. And he'll, do things talking about middle class, good white people, odes to John Brown, literally, and other so-called good white people who are not racist, that type of a thing. And I said he's in such a vulnerable position, and Noel Hanrahan, unless I'm in error, classified as white, is the person who is responsible, or for many years was responsible directly for posting a lot of his audio archives so that people could hear his commentary to begin with. So it might be that he is required or politely coerced into picking up some of these other causes, so it doesn't seem like he's just this Negro male former Black Panther who is in here talking about racism, white supremacy. White people might be less interested in helping to promote him getting books published and getting his idea out at all, so people even know he's still alive. That could easily be the case. That notwithstanding, he even said, many thanks to the rainbow. Like, what? What? I remember the book Pink Swastika. Like, I don't even know what that is. Matter of fact, I remember when the rainbow, people classified as white, had lots of scorn and blame for black people, talking about how homophobic we were after 2008 in California. That notwithstanding, and victims guaranteed qualified to Mumia. The segment where they talked about the slave ship and it being curated, and they mentioned Alado Equiano. We read about Alado Equiano, or we've read about, or discussed and read about him specifically. We talked about it many times, but we read about him in Delectable Negro. Vincent Woodard deconstructs some of the passages from his autobiography, Equiano, where it sounds kind of homoerotic, where these white race soldiers, slavers, are taking advantage of this young child on a slave ship, which happened frequently. Belly warmers, they got that in Roots, right? The one from way, way back. Same thing with young boys and all the rest. In the same segment, Madeline Burnside, when talking about all this, she said that history is dirty. I have no idea what that means. That term dirty is in the word guide, one of those words that Mr. Fuller recommends that we not use, because sometimes they'll mean dirty. They'll have the dirty version of a song where they can put all the filth, florin, filths in there. What do you mean history is dirty? They don't say that when they're talking about Thomas Jefferson raping Sally Hemings. Oh, the history is dirty. What are you even talking about, man? What part is clean? What would that be? Just be accurate and stop. There's more of the rhetoric. There's some of it right there. There's, oh, it was dark times, dirty times. When they talked about in Germany the sudden economic downturn, they were saying that they need to be more reliant on digital technology and maybe electrical vehicles and all the rest. Like, whoa, it sounds like they need Elon Musk over there. Can they get him to do a conference or Zoom at least? And they continued and they said, well, what does this mean for the growth of populism, nativism, extremism, the anti-democratic? But they say all of this. No, what does this mean for racism? What does this mean for white supremacy? They being people classified as white, you're never supposed to say racism. You are never supposed to say racism, and certainly not white supremacy. Because that's what it is. But no, extremism, populism. They say that over here sometimes, especially extremism. They love that one. They had a number of different reports, and it's been like 2 weeks or so, 2-3 weeks since the election. They've had a number of these type reports of woe, sorrowful black females exclusively, and they are the strongest, most reliable backbone of the Democratic Party, and what are they going to do when they're exhausted and frustrated and tired and all the rest of it? Yum, yum. Got it. Whatever. One, with these reports, I never hear anything like that where it's black males talking about they went out and voted or how they feel about the election. Nothing. It's just black females. And then if black males are included, it's with scorn. Leroy has shifted right. Leroy and Lil Wayne are voting for Trump. Leroy and Lil Wayne didn't vote at all. They were too lazy, shiftless, high. They stayed at home and they played PlayStation. Or they got arrest records and felonies and they weren't able, or they forgot their identification. It's some sort of scorn. Remember, President Obama, they're sexist. You know you're sexist and you don't want to support Sister Kamala Harris, best VP we've ever had. You sexist, no count scoundrels, you. Remember, it's just for scorn if the black males are going to be mentioned. Now, I mean, that alone would be enough to kind of, really, you just got Obama to come and wag his finger at me specifically. No mention of these white chicks either time. Like, man, they came out and went tough for President Trump 3 elections in a row, and we get to them. We got to get back to old shiftless Leroy. But even all the emotion, I said that before, like, if Kamala Harris had won, and they had a stream of programs, and it was the exact opposite. They had the brunch, and the black females are just elated. This is the best times ever, and whoopee, we're going to have black, like, I'd have said the same, like, now, come on. Now, you know good and well. Like, you've seen President Obama, like, come on. The young lady that they had on, where she said, my faith guides me, VGQ, follow your religion. Which is regardless of who's in the White House, we just got to keep up and doing what my religion says. And particularly towards the end where she said, hey, there's a different female speaker, black female speaker, where she said, hey, we are going to be as healthy as we can. We're going to eat healthy foods. We're going to save money. We're going to offer constructive assistance. Like, oh my goodness, that sounds exactly out of the code book. That should be the procedure regardless of who had won the election. We're going to be saving money. We're not wasting money. We're going to be out constructive activities, paying attention to the news, certainly the local news at least. Getting some exercise. We're going to eat healthy, do constructive things with our time and energy. Bravo. That is brilliant post-election response, and you use that every time. Even if the person that you want to win wins, that's still what we're going to do. Our assignment: replace white supremacy with justice. Specifically, and you heard it again, that segment in Georgia where they had the brunch, nobody mentioned racism. Now, VGQ, third time, hey, they don't have to. But nobody mentioned racism, and they started that segment saying that although these young ladies, their candidate didn't win, they wanted Kamala Harris to come out on top. They think the election, or they said they don't think the election was unfair. And they went on to talk about all the issues and blah, blah, blah. No mention of race. And they said the system, they asked, do you think the system is broken? What system is that? Told y'all, Dorothy Roberts and company, when they spoke at the University of Washington earlier this year, they said specifically, whoa, 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 the system is not broken. It is working exactly as it has been defined. And when Dorothy Roberts specifically said, when you point this out to white people, they are resistant. It's not that they don't know. They know. They know. Dedicated. That's the D word. Let's see. And then there was so much rhetoric in those segments, with so-called coalitions. I don't even know what that means. That we're stronger together and we're going to build coalitions and racial equality. I don't know what any of that means. United, independent. I don't think it is wise to, go out thinking we're going to have a large group of non-white people and we're going to coalesce around whatever. United, independent. We set that as the goal. It doesn't really matter because we're not friends and homies. And I mean, it should be obvious, certainly from the election. Wow, it's kind of difficult to get all of us, in unison about voting or whatever else. So this is going to have to be kind of a united independent front and even a better grasp of exactly what it is we're trying to do here. Let's see. When they got my favorite term, they said there has been a spike in racist activity. I was waiting for it. They said they have been emboldened a bit more. And they said it a few times. They sending out the racist text messages and all of it. They just emboldened way more than they were emboldened last time. Come on, man. Come on, man. If I had offspring, I would point that out. Like, now, really, in fact, I would say, hey, now, let's do a project. Let's track the usage of the term emboldened over the last 20 years, because I don't even hear that term used for anybody else. The only people that are emboldened are people classified as white, and they are emboldened to practice white supremacy racism. I do not hear anybody like, wow, your dad getting the diabetes and passing away at 45, that really emboldened you to eat that broccoli and put that white sugar down and I don't never hear nobody say that. George Floyd and all the videos and everything, you said you just stayed up and watched TikTok, that just emboldened you to study Neely Fuller Jr. and county racism. I don't ever, I don't even hear the word emboldened applied to non-white people. That would be a project right there. You could even incorporate that into English class. Let's see the last 20 years, and you could do, a search online easily. You can see how it pops up. When does this word, has it become more popular? Is it about the same usage over the last 20 years? You can see how it's been used in newspapers, online, because they got transcripts on YouTube, so you could check social media. How has this term been used? Because I don't hear non-white people. Does anybody else get emboldened for anything else? For even not like, wow, Leroy has been emboldened in the crack smuggling business. Wow. Does anybody else but do non-white people get emboldened? Only folks that I hear are emboldened are racist man, racist woman, racist child, and they should be emboldened to the max. Like, we got it. We got it. They are rowdy and loud and doing it to it. They are doing too much and been doing too. We got it. We got it. We got it. Got it. Yes. Don't say emboldened no more. And then we got the Ghost of the Wood, which we should have maybe heard a third time because they do not have no rules and protect. If anybody finds rules and protections like that for something that is dark, whoa, whoa, whoa. If it's black or even close to black, like is almost gray, it's close enough. Mind me of my Uncle Leroy. You shouldn't have done that. We're going to take your license, put you in jail, all the rest of it. If you know of any rules like that, because I know of a bunch of rules like that. White squirrels, white doves, white ravens, white bucks, white albino, close enough. Leucistic, they say something. That was a leucistic one. I get it. Close enough. Close enough. Give me the license. You're going to jail. Shooting leucistic bucks. What's wrong with you? Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Thank you to the listener who sent me the albino affairs. Lots of listeners send me news reports, for a variety of things. Certainly while I was in California, I did not have extra time to research albinism, which maybe I should have. But much obliged to the listener who sent me the segment, Ghost in the Wood. Wow. All-time favorite classic for albino affairs. Why we have the segment in the first place. White or albino, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They are all protected. Let's see. Folks who dialed in with a hand up. Oh, we even have folks in Macon. I hope we don't have any of the young ladies from the bruncheon to fuss at me. Let's see.
Hello.
Oh, man, our caller in Georgia. Yes, ma'am.
I hope everyone's having the best evening they can have. Hope everybody had a good holiday or whatever you want to call it. The segment with the educated women who went to school, I do agree with, of course, I think towards the end where they said getting healthy and all those type of things. Of course, they want to try to create division between black men and black women with the voting, where most of even their own reports show that black people, men, women, whatever you classify yourself as, if you're black, you voted pretty much together. They do that all the time, and I don't know why they do it, but I don't know why some people, I guess, I don't want to say, for lack of a better term, fall for it or believe that division is there. I've heard a couple of people say they were going to vote for Trump, but I wasn't going to stop being their friend or family member. So I know there's been a lot of fallout for that. I wish I would, because you voted for a different person. To me, that is crazy. But I did look up, I guess you asked about when we have Jamal, what he talked about that article, the black man being burned and then the gay person. From what I could tell in the, 5 or 10 minutes you asked about it, there was a black man who was burned, I guess, maybe in 1997. There was a trial in 1998. The article I have is from November 3rd, 1998. Then there was a gay homeless man found in March 1999. So I don't know if those were the people that he was talking about, but based on looking it up and the proximity of those events, I guess it may be those people. I just send you the articles. I'm not having contact you in a while. I'm guessing your email address is the same, and at least that could be a starting point, maybe for you to verify that is the correct information. Other than that, most of the other information was good. I didn't think I would hear so much about the election. I was over obsessed with it, but you learn and study and kind of find out a lot of things. So hopefully I can retain that in the event that I do have offspring. I can kind of say I kept myself informed to see what would happen and probably hopefully share constructive information with an offspring or a cousin of an offspring or whoever. But that is all. I'm going to start working next week. So hopefully I will have good stories and not any sexual harassment or any other things like I had before. Although before overall was good, but hopefully this time it will be better. And again, glad you were able to go do some research. Hopefully there will be a time, maybe you can make that an annual thing, I guess a research sojourn or whatever. Hopefully, we can help in that going forward. That is all. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Much obliged, caller in Georgia. Wow, that's scary. It's a long time. Like having my blender. Have to have a blender solution next time around. Much obliged for researching. Thank you kindly. If we narrowed it down, she said she thinks she found the dates in the kind of late 90s for these. I guess what do we call that? Immolation or decapitation? And I mean, it was a lot, right, for what he said. So, yes, that would be great. I will research afterwards and see, because it sounds like that those dates, because he said it was old. This was not recent. He said this was kind of archived. He was going back and reading what he wrote. So that might be it exactly. Yeah, and then the health aspect. That's for everybody. Every election be about taking excellent care of yourself, all areas of people activity, taking good financial care, mental health care, in terms of your diet, nutritional care, all of the above, getting some exercise, all of that, sleep, all of that. And I forgot, sobriety would be best. They will have sobriety checkpoints through Monday, I suspect, especially if you have younger motorists. Tell them, get to one spot and sit your hind parts down. You do not want to be out 10:30, 11, midnight, riding around, going this place. None of that. None of that. Asking for trouble. Dr. Campbell talked about that all the time. You are asking for trouble. And plenty of it. Other folks who dialed in with a hand up, if you have commentary to share, proceed.
May I be heard?
Lauren, yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. About the segments you played tonight, the Germany segment, I noticed I don't remember them saying racism or white supremacy at all. They said it was a lot of support for right-wing extremist parties. They said populism was on the rise. They said it was concerns and worries about the future, I guess, for white people. That's, I don't know, kind of code for white genetic annihilation. And they were talking about social benefits might need to be reduced and conflicts in Europe. And they also said Germany has a history with a very, very dark spot in the 1930s and 40s. So, I guess I think they said it was 6 million. Well, I think the people called Jews were considered non-white in the 30s and 40s, and they probably still are by many races. So that was interesting. It was a very, very dark spot. The voting segment, there was something in there. Oh, I don't know. Maybe it was the lady who said she was 24 years old and she said she cut her maternity leave short to go work for this Democratic candidate. Oh, well, I don't know. I think your offspring is pretty important. The Kentucky segment, it said they felt discomfort around the statement because they have difficulty dealing with white supremacists. And he also said it was a reaffirmation of white supremacy in education. And he started talking about the definition of white supremacy. And I think he said he wasn't talking about some sort of cartoonish definition of white supremacy like the KKK, or he listed some other sort of stereotypical racist. And I don't remember, maybe I just missed it, if he did give a definition of racist. If he did, I missed it. There was another part where they were talking about the Aryan Freedom Network and Trump encouraging his followers to, have hateful rhetoric or whatever, or encouraging his followers with his hateful rhetoric. And it said he emboldened them, but also said he had increased support by non-white people. I don't think they said non-white. And it made me think. There was like an article in the New York Times within the last week. Let me check here. It was on November the 21st, 2024. Okay. And in that article, they said something very similar. The name of the article was White Supremacist Incidents Are Rising Across the U.S. And it said flash demonstrations intended to spread fear and anxiety are happening almost weekly, says expert who tracks the incident. This was on the 21st. And in the article, it said President Trump was backed by, how did it say? Give me a second. It said President Trump was backed by Latinos, Black voters, union workers, angel moms, law enforcement officers, Border Patrol agents, and Americans of all faiths. I was not familiar with this term, angel moms, so I had to Google it. And apparently it used to mean just a mother whose child has died, but now it seems to mean a white woman whose child has been killed by an immigrant or a non-white person. So that's pretty interesting. Let me see. The high school incident, the Colorado high school, where they go into the locker room, they said it was racial and homosexual slurs written in the dust in the locker room. And it's not, well, I thought it was a non-white person. I'm not sure. But he said being a minority in Colorado is already hard. So I thought he was non-white. I didn't hear any gay people talk about how hard it was to be gay in Colorado. I thought he was talking about being non-white. Also, what I thought was a black lady. She said kids shouldn't have to experience such things. And I do think that's true. But I think no person should have to experience such a thing. Such racist mistreatment is incorrect at any age. And on NPR, that they have a show called Kansas City Today. There was they talked about Roger Kalubsky for 20 or 30 minutes, and they said he's finally supposed to go on trial. I'm not exactly sure when that trial is starting, but I guess I'll try to be aware of what's going on with that. And that's all I have for now. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Oh, wait. I checked the word emboldened, and the word the usage is pretty high right now. It hasn't been this high since the decade 1860 to 1869. Then it was mentioned 1.2 times per million words. And now, well, it's not now. The last count they have is 2010 to 2019, but 2016 is when Trump was elected. And so it's 1.14 times per million for that period of time. So I think it's pretty high. Before that, it was rather low. The the rest of the 1900s, it was low, 0.39 times per million or a little lower than that. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Much obliged, Lauren. Now that is fascinating. Dr. Welsing, 2 times. If my Negro peanut-sized brain processed that correctly, where she said the other period where there was a substantial spike in the usage of the term emboldened was 1860s. So, well, looky there. Dr. Welsing told us we read Penn Pitchfork Tillman, the reconstruction of white supremacy. That is the time period right there. End of the Civil War, 1865, and then that 10, 15 year period. And she said it was the 1860 to 1869, if I heard correctly. So that's bang, you got right there. How interesting. Spiking it. Were they talking about Frederick Douglass being emboldened? Were they talking about Nigger Jim being emboldened? Uppity niggers free from the plantation, emboldened around white women? Maybe that's how they were using it. I don't know. That's what I mean. Like, you could have fascinating English projects. You just say, write a 5-page research paper on compare and contrast the usage of the term emboldened in the 1860s to the early 2000s. And see, they can go back and check what maybe they were saying. They were, concerned about emboldened Nigger Jim. Maybe they were saying that. That would be fascinating, because that's not what they're saying now. And they could even check that. Is Gus accurate? Is it pretty restricted in terms of the usage emboldened? They don't really talk about non-white people being emboldened now. It's just white people being emboldened to practice race. And I'm even saying that. They only talk about white people being emboldened, and it's only emboldened to practice racism. It's not emboldened with any other context. Nothing constructive, just white people practicing racism. Is that true? Words, man, very important, even just showing how people think. Especially they've been emboldened for about a decade or so since Trump took, as she said, 2016. That's a good decade of emboldenedness. We got it. Number 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Can I at least, for Dr. Welsing one more time, I did think of myself slightly following in the footsteps, metaphor as they say, of Dr. Welsing. She went all the way to Germany to study World War II, the dark spot in the history. I did the same thing. I just didn't go as far, and I don't know. I get the exact dates to see how long she hung out in Germany, but hey, Dr. Welsing did the exact same thing. I want to learn about this. Let me go to the source and learn. Hey, following in Dr. Welsing's footsteps, perhaps, metaphor, learning counter-racist research, very, very important.
May I be heard?
Irie, Louisiana. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Just real quick, I'm thinking about not so much the etymology of the word bold or embolden, but the utility of it. So for me, what I'm hearing is white people practice racism, but when they're emboldened, they're practicing it in a way where victims of racism should be less confused that they're experiencing racism, white supremacy, because emboldened most of the time is when something is, like, say, for instance, a word on a page, it's already on a page. But when you add weight to the word to make the lines or the characters thicker, that's making it bold. So it's the word is there already, but when you embolden it, you're emphasizing it more. You're making it more apparent. That's what I got from it. I hope I wasn't confusing. And I don't mean to use a metaphor. I'm just literally thinking of it in a typographical way. You see something better when it's bold, do we not? I think so. It was a couple things. I found that I want to share. I found the article on the robots in jail interesting because I just did a training trying to get a business grant with using AI and chatbots in business, and now they're using robots in the jail. And what I'm thinking is they want to do these massive data mining projects, getting, sweeping amounts of information from people who don't have informed consent, or, they're deprived of it, or they're not informed enough to really truly have informed consent, and they have no plans on keeping it secure, letting you audit your information, opting out. In the training I got, they're like, you need to be using the chatbot. Like, you're behind if you're not using the chatbot and AI. And it's like, the loss of human interaction for just jobs in general, it's remarkable. It reminds me of that book, Future Work, that they released, the Bureau of Employment. I'm probably getting it wrong right now. You know what I'm trying to say. But the people that study what's happening in jobs statistically and through the census said this during the Clinton administration. The book club, I was already interested in it, but I am even more now because I've been informed that we have lineage to the Congo, which I would have thought would have been not possible, but somebody older than me and my family did the research and found the plantations we came from or derived from, centralized in southern Louisiana, and then found out further that we're from the Congo. So I'm interested in the book even more so, plus the whole thing about the Métis and, how they do that is similar to the racial showcasing confusion with mulattoes and quadroons and all that other stuff, having a little bit more access to a little bit easier of a life, but then you get reminded, no, still nigga, somewhere along the way. I wanted to express, Gus, that I'm regretful that we couldn't do that research project or that research session with the Black Student Union when I was allowed to moderate it, there we go. Which was a volunteer act. The person that was getting paid wasn't showing up, and I know we had planned it, and then all of a sudden I was like, nope, that's not happening. And I regret it so much because when you talk about the research you did in California and the research you do on a weekly basis, and I don't get to do a whole lot of research. It's very topical at best at times because I'm just more of a doer. I have so much I have to do. I don't really get a chance to research, but I've spent the day talking to 2 alumni of the high school, and they're even regretful that we didn't have a chance to do a lot more of these things and also more avid and honest discussions about the system of racism and white supremacy, because they're in situations, they've been confused about things since they've been in college, about professors dealing with, studying and time management, dealing with roommates that are being like non-constructive and, other so-called life skills. And one student was like, they're making the Black Student Union to be more about throwing events, like having parties basically. And I'm like, why do you think that is? And I asked them, because I know it was a discussion that they wanted to get the Black Student Union to be as popular as the Hispanic Student Union because they throw parties all the time, but there's no discussion about things that they need to know. And when I was there trying to do it, I was admonished. It was like, don't talk about that. You're going to make us lose our jobs, the teachers or whatever. Like, we still have to work here, And there was no safe place to talk about racism, white supremacy. And I apologized if I did something to catalyze that response. I was just trying to provide constructive information. Somebody asked me to come. I came and I did what I was supposed to do, in my mind. And I'm just hoping you all become universal people, which is producing justice. ultimately, and understanding yourself. But that would have been really good because they don't know how to research. So I'm trying to help them. I'm learning how to do it better myself, trying to help them. And they also don't know how to do some other stuff I do know how to do. But it was a missed opportunity. You would have been very good, you know. So 5 stars for you. And one other thing back to the robots and just bots in general, I'm getting the feeling that the training that they're doing with people to introduce them or get them into AI and, you know, IT, eventually these jobs are going to become sparse, like very few and far in between, and they're going to become the new minimum wage jobs. So it seems like we should be like doing a lot more in STEM and all that other stuff, but I feel like it's going to be some kind of, it's a trick somewhere along the way, something to confuse us, to make us think that we're going to have economic opportunity in the future with these jobs when really they're just going to want a few people to just make sure the machines are running. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Much obliged, Irie. The bots in the jail. Lauren had mentioned that yesterday on neutralizing workplace racism. That would for sure be one. If you have offspring to probably, like, hey, you want to go out and do a little buzzed driving this weekend, especially if you live in Georgia. Hey, look who you might bump into. How about that? They don't even have names for them. Even that gave me pause because Dr. Kevorkian, we had talked about that before. People get names. Non-humans, they don't get names. Anyway, that would for sure be one to talk about with your offspring. Not just, hey, checking the news. How about that? What do you think? Do you have any concerns? Sobriety would be best. The research, I do remember Irie when she wanted to do the research symposium to have the young folks and just kind of go over some of the tips for researching, because the white people have so much data. She said she is excited for the book club. Boy, based on some of the research, because I said, hey, you're in such a phenomenal spot to research. I wonder what they have on Andre Bloom. They have whole files and such on her. Copy, quick, copy that too. Her name kept popping up in other files because they had so many boxes and boxes and boxes on how white people assassinated Patrice Lumumba. That is the second half of the book, Africa, or My Country, Africa. Resuming on Thursday. We haven't even got to the main portion of what the book is all about and why they have all these files, probably why that book was hit. I even think, I forgot, I told you, I don't even know what I have. I got a white person who wrote like a thesis on this book and Andre Bloom. I didn't even read it. I told you, when you go, that's one for research now. When you go and you see like, oh, this is not going to be 10 things. This is going to be like 10,000 things. Or even, something beyond the limit of what I deem to be reasonable. Like, this is going to be 100 things. You don't really have time to read it at them, regardless of how amazing it is. Really, all that means is make sure you get a really great copy and get a codified system so you get great copies every time, so you can do this quickly as possible. You might have to do it 10,000 times. Maybe you can figure out a way to get 2 on a page. So you can do it 5,000 times. But either way, just do it quickly, efficiently, especially where you don't have to go back and take a picture again and scan it. Like, that is the worst. The worst. But yes, research again. And I didn't really see a lot of, but not that I expected to. I mean, Stanford is deliberately William Shockley. So I didn't expect to see a lot of black people down there, and I didn't. I did see a really pretty black lady researching at Stanford, and I don't speak, especially at Stanford, like the whole vibe. William Shockley, eugenics. You're not even supposed to be here. But she did say, "Hey, how you doing?" I was stunned, like, what? And I almost wanted to be like, because the people there are so smart, like, what are you studying? But I thought that was a bit too intrusive, but I was really nosy, like, what exactly are you? Oh, but I forgot. I knew going to Stanford, have to research Jonestown. They have Jonestown goodies. Oh my God, do they have Jonestown goodies? But Dr. William Shockley, Dr. Welsing's nemesis, I have to research Dr. William Shockley, get some audio, see what I can find. So I got to make time to see what I can find at least. I'm going and getting some of the different papers that he has on Negroes and how stupid we are and eugenics and all the rest of this. Man, and they got boxes and boxes and boxes and cassettes and all the rest on Dr. William Shockley, who himself had recordings of Dr. Welsing. I go to get like the third or fourth box on Dr. William Shockley out of boxes and I can't even count how many boxes of material they have. White girl at the counter, if I had to guess, I'd say she's maybe 21, 22. She says, oh man, with a huge smile. This is at the Hoover Special Collections where they issue you government ID. I think it's government ID because it's got a picture on it. It's college. I think it's government ID. I'm going to try it. This white lady whispers, oh man, what are you studying? Eugenics? William Shaw. Oh my gosh. You've got to go to the Green Library. They have got so much material. I'm doing my own project on eugenics in Britain, but loosely related to Dr. Shockley's work. She was like 21. White people are not ignorant about racism. Gus T, at this point, I had already been to the Green Library. At this point, I had been to the Green Library 3 times already. So I went to the Green Library at Stanford first. And then I went to the Hoover Library. So I was very aware of how much material they had on Dr. Shockley. That's where the audio cassettes of Dr. Welsing are located. The Green Library at Stanford. You need government identification to enter all of these facilities. It is free, but it isn't. That would be another. Oh, wait a minute. Let me give one more story. Especially for our content today. So, literally, you could take 1/4 turn from where I had the conversation with this young lady about how much material they have about Dr. Shockley and eugenics, Dr. Welsing. You could take 1/4 turn to your right, and there's it's a library, right? There's a whole shelf of books, and I said, man, is this like the Nazi section? Like, I drift over and it's all this, like Hitler did, Nazi, like, what? Time out. I'm waiting for you can only get 1 box of material at a time, so they give you the box. You have to be very codified about all that and no hats, blah, blah, blah. I get my box, I go back, and I go to the library, and very quiet. This is the super extra duper quietest library ever. I say, can you check out any of the books? Not to leave the facility, of course, but I mean to sit down and look at. She says, oh yeah, it's a library. Just put the folder in when you take a book out. Now, even that. Have you ever been to a library where you go get a book? You have to put something in the slot where you took the book out at. Anyway, I went and removed several books. Slot, boom, put that there, because she gave me like 3 or 4 of the little folders to take books. I took like 3 or 4, like, what? I was stunned, like, man, what is it? What? And when I was looking, she said, oh, did something caught your eyes that related to your research? And I said, it looks like you got all this Nazi Germany stuff. I was studying eugenics. She said, oh, yeah. She had the biggest smile, even bigger than the young lady who was telling me about Dr. Shockley's material. She was also very excited. Man, she was so proud. This white woman, different white woman. She said, oh, yes. Our Nazi collection is one of our specialties. Man, woo! Dr. Frances Cress, she went to Germany to study this exact. Thank you kindly, ma'am. I'm going to take 3, 4 books. Like, what? And then, of course, Dr. Shockley's University, of course, Nazi, of course, this would be our specialty. Man, they had racks and racks of material on white people. Oh my God. The material on racism in the Congo specifically is baffling. It's like they have documents from the State Department and man, white people are not ignorant about racism. Not at all. Not at all. It is staggering, and once again, we are worthy of great pity. Jesus Christ, just the information alone. Us on PlayStation, watching TV. Irie was telling us about the program for the black children down there who can't even read. They want to do poetry and nonsense. And you go look at the white people at Stanford. They let in one Cory Booker, one Condoleezza Rice every other year, one Cow's listener or 2 every other year. But that is an institution designed for white supremacy. It's designed for William Shockleys and lots of them. Man, maybe even all of Palo Alto. Man, I have never been anywhere. You go to get on the shuttle, you get off the train, you literally take one step off the train, and you are on the most comfortable free shuttle to the doorstep. Not just they drop you off in front of the school, like to the exact bang, wherever you're going in the man. Woo! Palo Alto. Refined race soldiers in Stanford. Well, go back and listen to Malcolm Harris when he was on the program the beginning of this year. Palo Alto. Oh my God! Go back and listen to that. Staggering. I saw that book while I was down there. I was at Berkeley, not Stanford, which whatever. I was at Berkeley and I saw that. I almost blurted out like, "Hey, we just interviewed that." System of white supremacy, racism research. So important. But I remember when Irie was going to do that research, it can be so intimidating, going to some of these locations because there are no black people. There are no black people as patrons coming to research Jonestown or the Congo or whatever. And then generally there are no black people as employees, who would be the guiding hand to, oh, this is our special Nazi collection. What are you researching? Oh, this is what it, blah, blah, blah. No, it's going to be generally all white people, generally all white women. There were quite a few white men as well, but generally white women. Lots more of them than anybody else. It can be intimidating, especially sometimes they might be friendly. They might not. It might be you have to kind of know the procedure to be able to access the information. And, man, it should be required, though. I cannot emphasize enough. It's totally free if you live, in the California area, wherever you are. Take advantage. You can go to the community college. Go to the library. Take advantage. That's where they had Urugu at the community college in Seattle. That's where I went. I own a copy now, but that's where I went and started reading it at. I didn't own a copy at the time. They had it at the community college. Take advantage. I've talked about resources that, any of the public. Stanford isn't even public. I went there 8 times and sometimes hung out all day long. Even went to the lecture, told you, and tried to eat all their spring rolls because I was so outraged with the display of white supremacy, racism, and deliberately so by a white woman, no less. But regardless, it's not even public. You can still go to the library. It's just, now it is a procedure, but you can't do it. That's just, that's the type of thing. Would have been cool. I agree with Ari. Would have been cool because I think more black people need to. I think a lot of black people don't know that sort of information. A lot of us have had a really terroristic experience in racist schools with anti-black teachers, lots of racist white women educators, and all the rest of it. So we just have missed out on learning. Oh, wow, there's a lot of information that you could learn that would be really helpful about a wealth of subject matters in the world. And you could go and use this information, and it would be helpful to you for a lot of reasons, wherever you happen to be. It might even be worth it to travel to some of these locations to pick up information in a different spot if you're doing something very, specific, a specific subject or what have you. But yeah, take advantage, learn. A lot of times they have library, tours and classes where they'll show you how to do these searches, how to use the catalog, and all of that. And at minimum, a lot of times they should have staff to come and, hey, help me, whatever the case, to guide you along until you figure things out for yourself. But man, there's so much to know. The jail bots, so much. Who was this person set on fire and decapitated? Like, there's always so much to know, and research being capable with regards to utilizing the library and other sources to gather information at the time that you need it is so critical. And we are so pitiful. I did think of Dr. Welsing in that regard so frequently, like, wow, I failed, like I wish I had done this earlier. I do think some of this information, just based on dates, might not have been cataloged prior to 2016, 2015. So time is what it is. But some of this definitely was available in Dr. Welsing's lifetime. Like, man, we have not been on our assignment. We have been watching TV. It's been way too much watching television and not. Let's be serious. At least if we're not going to throw that TV out, let's super minimize that and be about nonfiction, research, lower things that Dr. Welsing seemed to emphasize as important. Jonestown was one. Nazi Germany was another one. White genetic annihilation in total was another one. I'm going to at least CRISPR, because that was one we talked about right before she passed. Donald Trump, those are things she was talking about right before his passing. Those are things that might be worth, in any books that she mentioned might be worth. Einstein on Race and Racism, we read that one, might be worth checking out. Marcus Rediker's The Slave Ship, we had him as a guest on the program. That's one she recommended. Might be worth. Lothrop Stoddard, Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy, we read that one in the book club. Things that she mentioned or what have you might be worth serious study, investigating. Jonestown alone. Staggering. Any other folks' commentary they want to make sure they get in before we wrap up? We missed anybody? Number 605-313-5164. The code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you have been emboldened to participate. Let's see. Told you, no one emboldened, but racist man, racist woman to practice racism. They don't get emboldened to eat carrots, recycle, emboldened exclusively to practice racism, white supremacy. Book club should be back on schedule Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We could have done it last Thursday, but I thought it would be a little jarring, awkward for me to just pop back in. Been off for a couple weeks, no explanation, what was going on in California, all the rest. At least take some time to detail some of that, all which I guess will continue if I get, more of the material and all the rest, and I maybe even go through. Especially, I got material for the book club. I was not thinking, hey, my computer is going to still log in at least for a week or so, like I'm still at Cal Berkeley. So how wonderful, I can research even once I get back, which I've been doing. But man, I was trying to take advantage while I was down there, because I did research at Stanford too, and wow, they had quite a bit of pictures, like I said, whole reviews of this book, and white people. This is another book, My Country, Africa. This book was not intended for widespread circulation. We were talking about that. I think this is a book that was just kind of intended probably for white people, just like the book was Jonestown, a CIA medical experiment. That's what I mean. Man, that trip brought that to mind so frequently. It reminded me the whole time that we were talking, reading, studying Jonestown earlier this year. I said every day, oh my God, black people, we are so stupid and pitiful. As Mr. Fuller has said, wow, how can this event have happened not that long ago? Some of us were alive and not children when this happened, and we know nothing about, we didn't even get what was in the basic newspaper. Woo, I was reminded of that every day as I looked at the gargantuan amount of information that individuals classified as white stock, when I mean stock, when Neely Fuller says, man, we can get every grain of sand. What does that look like as it applies to Jones? And so we can get every newspaper, article, book, magazine, all of it. Documentaries, all of it. And exactly what he's put in a box and save it for 50 years or 500 years for whenever we need it. And have a lot of it curiously stored in files about brainwashing, mind control. How do you control the Negro? Worthy of great pity. That's another one. See, it's enough white people. This is far beyond. Don't drink the Kool-Aid, but they allow that nonsense. Oh, don't drink the Kool-Aid. Please. They had copies, multiple. Was Jonestown. I see. Who is reading this at Stanford and Berkeley? What class? What major do you? Is that a major? I never even heard that. Is that a major? Brainwashing? Mind control? Man. Should have went to Stanford. That's private. Probably couldn't have gotten it. Should have went to Stanford or Berkeley. Man. Missed out Marshawn Lynch. Seattle. Anyway. Book club on Thursday. Andre Bloom getting to the climax, second part of the book. Part of me was thinking that we should have stopped right at the end of part one and just taken an intermission while I was in California. But if we had done that, I would not have the portion that we read. She talked about the influence of Sekou Touré. Because of that, I was able to get his autobiography while I was in Cal Berkeley. That is one where they physically had that book in the old school prehistoric times, had that book in the library, and so I scanned it physically, the entire book. That was not one that I could just digital download and all the rest of it. So I took advantage of being there, and even that Cal Berkeley's library is public, so you can just walk in and get Sekou Touré's autobiography, but oh man, you got to have government ID and a visitor pass and all this, and that library is really big and confusing. Man, it is not, it is, again, you would have to have some skill to navigate, to figure out where am I going? Oh, okay. Because they have so much, this is one of those libraries where they have so much information, Cal Berkeley, where the shelves, they have the cranks on the shelves. You have to turn them because the shelves move. That's how much it is. That's when I was even thinking like, oh my God, what happens if you're in the shelf and someone starts turning their crank and you get squished in all of the books? Like, I don't know if that's just something in the movies or not, but that is at in the bowels of Cal Berkeley. That's how I had to get Sekou Touré's book. I had to turn the crank to get the thing to move so that I could grab his autobiography. There's so much, in particular, so much information on the Negro. They don't even have that many black people at Cal Berkeley. I said that too. Who's reading these books? Because they don't even have that many black people at Cal Berkeley, or Stanford, or USC, or UCLA. Who's reading these books? Usual suspects. Book club on Thursday. Hopefully, you will be safe. Sobriety would be best. You can sit home and read, do some research, find some recipes, clean, anything, but by the time it's 10:30, 10 p.m., you should be settled and not out roaming the streets. If you can walk to the corner store, grocer, whatever you need, that type of thing, post office, great. But park that vehicle, wait until the next day. They will probably have sobriety checkpoints through Monday, and they will be looking for dark people to say, oh, I was a little buzzed, little tipsy. Especially if you are a younger motorist, park that vehicle. Dr. Cam, I used to talk about that all the time. Don't mess up your insurance. Any hoodles. Much obliged for folks tuning in, hopefully worthy of your time and energy. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. No name calling, no gossiping, no throwaway offspring. Brother say, Gus, what was one of them Nazi books that they bragged about having at the Stanford Library? So glad you asked. Would you like two? One of them, Hitler's Gift. The true story of the scientists expelled by the Nazi regime. I said, that sounds so Jonestown, doesn't it? Seems like something I should have found for the Holocaust in Guyana. I said, two. The Nazis next door, how America became a safe haven for Hitler's men. I said, that's two that sounds Jonestown, Holocaust. They said this is they had a whole wall that this is what I was looking like. What in the William Shockley's alma mater, where he taught for decades. That's what I was doing. Waiting for this. I'm waiting for my boxes on William Shockley, looking at this. The Nazis next door. Hitler's Gift. At the Hoover Special Collections Stanford Library. Tell me white people is ignorant about racism, please. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim.
I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.